This is Wandering Universe. Today, I'll be exploring the lifestyle of the rich and famous Atlantis, described in Plato's Critias. So, let's go exploring. See what's in front of you? You know exactly what I'm talking about. So, let's get on with the show. Plato's Critias sounds more like a dramatic yet sensational soap opera filled with drama, suspense, mystery, angst, passion, lust, and most of all, substance. It is a story that has the flair for the majestic, the style of a Hollywood Inquirer, and the epic of a spaghetti western. But most of all, Plato's Critias is a story unlike no other. It tells of an ancient lost city that existed well over 12,500 years ago. A city that shone its spotlight to the world, showing off its wealth, glamour, beauty, and above all else, drama. It's like watching a B-grade soap opera unfold before your eyes, like that of The Bold and the Beautiful, The Young and the Restless, and Days of Our Lives. Yes, in this video, I'll be showcasing, without the wacky drama, the lifestyle of the rich and famous Atlantis. Sure, Hollywood should do a spin-off series from Plato's Critias like The Days of Our Atlantean Lives, or even better, The Young and the Restless Atlanteans. Now, let's not get carried away with all the dramatic hype. Maybe life in Atlantis wasn't so angsty after all. It could have been a romantic interlude like that of Romeo and Juliet. But this story is jam-packed full of juicy bits every Hollywood producer would love to get their hands on. But I'll guarantee you this, they'll never make the storyline as brilliant as the movies today. You can say that again. Critias is not an epic drama, edge-of-your-seat action hero movie. No, this is a narrative on how the Atlanteans lived. And no, I'm not referring to Atlanta, Georgia. Alright, let's go for a walk on the yellow brick road where it all began. Once upon a time ago, there was once an ancient lost city, situated far, far away in the middle of a lush green tropical paradise. It was called Atlantis. For some reason, Critias downplays Atlantis to suit some political agenda. But I'm not here to give you the latest political forecast on an upcoming scandal. I'm here to talk to you about Atlantis. Firstly, from my last video on the Ricard structure, also known as the Eye of the Sahara, Critias gives very rough coordinates of the location. Kind of roughly, diagonally from the Pillars of Hercules, which is today's Gibraltar, right here, heading down south if you sailed across, and down from the North Atlantic Ocean. So coming across right here to this area right here. Was Atlantis the most up-and-coming place during its time? Was it like living in paradise compared to Hawaii? Was its economy, infrastructure, and monetary system made it so powerfully wealthy? Well, let's find out, shall we? Here's a quote from Plato's Critias. Atlantis was an island greater in extent than Libya and Asia. Critias said that 9,000 years ago, dating back from their time, a war between two parties was at stake, Greece and the kings of Atlantis. Who were the kings of Atlantis? Where did they come from? And whom were they descendants of? He ends that quote with, and when afterwards, sunk by an earthquake, became an impassable barrier of mud to voyagers sailing from hence to any part of the ocean. Okay, that indicates that the island of Atlantis near a coastline. Whereabouts? Does this picture indicate that? For some weird reason, the Athenians and barbarians joined forces to fight off the Atlanteans. Critias was told that they were gods, but in this video I'll refer to them as pre-ancients for now. You might imagine Atlantis, as described by Critias, was a huge island, probably the size of Australia. Yes, down under is the largest island continent on Earth. However, Atlantis was known as the country, an island within a country. But what about the city centre? Did it have an actual name of a capital city? We don't know. But it sure seemed like the newly established place to really live it up day and night, like Las Vegas, New York City, Hawaii, and Monaco. As I said in the previous video titled Plato's Critias, Was He Lying About Atlantis? The gods, although they were unlikely to be such as, must have been in possession of a map that detailed the landmass continents on Earth, such as this one, as you can see right here. They proceeded to subdivide them to various locations by way of design, town planning, and district allocation. I believe these lands were allocated to the 21 megalithic structures on the celestial equator like Petra, Egypt, Pumapunku, Machu Picchu, and many, many more. Poseidon, that's what he was supposedly called, was given a portion of land by them. If that were the case, they already had a preconceived plan prior to landing in northern Africa. It's like as if they knew where to set up shop before they landed. Surprisingly, logical and concise as they were, no quarrels, arguments, complaints, and debates ensued. Here's a quote to describe this. Now, different gods had their allotments in different places which they set in order. I don't know. I'm getting the hunch that these pre-ancients, whoever they were, knew what they were doing. Anyhow, he goes on to say that these gods recruited us humans, but not just any sort of human, only a particular sort, the ones that showed compassion with a hint of risk-taking, meaning the ones that questioned the wrongs of life and authority and had the balls to stick it to the man. And when they had peopled them, they tended us, the nurslings and possessions, as shepherds tend their flocks, expecting only that they did not use blows or bodily force, as shepherds do, but governed us like pilots from the stern of the vessel, which is an easy way of guiding animals, holding our souls by the rudder of persuasion according to their own pleasure. Thus did they guide all mortal creatures. So, these gods mentored two potential savants. On the outside, they were made of the wrong stuff, like, hey, not too crash hot at sports, for example, but on the inside, they were made of the right stuff. If they showed they loved what they did and did their best, well, they were blessed. So, were these pre-ancients quite compassionate creatures like that of Starman? Their lessons consisted of art, philosophy, wisdom, and virtue stemmed from life experiences. It's like studying a psychology course on understanding the mind and common sense, except it's outside the classroom. Here's a quote. And being united also in the love of philosophy and art, both obtained as their common portion this land, which was naturally adapted for wisdom and virtue. And there they implanted brave children of the soil, and put into their minds the order of government. Their names are preserved. This is where it gets a little trivia here. For some unfortunate circumstance, some idiots, like this one on screen, had to come in and ruin things for everyone else. A jealous top dog, maybe, decided from the mountains, felt threatened by them. Maybe that idiot didn't realize it didn't have the right mindset to undertake their mentorship program. Here's a quote to refer to this. The names they were willing enough to give to their children, but the virtues and the laws of their predecessors they knew only by obscure traditions, and as they themselves and their children lacked for many generations the necessaries of life, they directed their attention to the supply of their wants, and of them they conversed to the neglect of events that had happened in times long past. In other words, these primitive humans of our ancestral past didn't have the mind capacity to understand reason. Our minds were still at the developing stages. Writing wasn't even invented yet. So these illiterate primitive humans, who were incapable of understanding future consequences of their actions, had led them to stay fixated and set in their primitive ways. It is possible that after the city of Atlantis became a barren wasteland, that human clans and tribes just simply walked over to the island and set up shop, like forming a new society using whatever they could salvage at their disposal and create a new township under a centralized power system, top dog rules by decree. Here's a quote. That war mentioned most of the names which are recorded prior to the time of Theseus, such as Cercops and Eurystheus and Erychthonus and Ersichthon, and the names of the women in like manner. Could it be that these pre-ancients held high commanding positions? That they were not exactly human as per se, but they were beings from a highly advanced civilization? That possessed knowledge that the primitive humans did not? Even the women held positions of rank, such as the ones from Star Trek and Stargate. Think of Major Sam Carter. Alright, enough said. Let's get to the guts of it. Critias talks about the lifestyle that seemed to lean more towards human habitation, that the pre-ancients coexisted with us at some point. However, that remains to be skeptical as there is no evidence to suggest that. He goes on to narrate the formation of Atlantean society. So, to recap, Poseidon, so called, was given a portion of large land, in which he turned into an island and called it, as you can see here, Atlantis. He then proceeded to create the landscape into an elliptical structure to form an island. He used some weird technology that wasn't even heard of during Solon's time, a lathe instrument. A lathe is a machine, as you can see here, used in metalworking, wood turning, metal spinning, even glass working. It can be used to shape pottery, such as the potter's wheel is an ancient designed lathe. The first lathe machine developed was a two-person lathe machine, as you can see here, created in Egypt in 1300 BC. A rope turns the wood working piece manually and cutting shapes in the wood by a sharp implement. It wasn't until the Romans made more improvements to this technology, as you can see right here, not by hand but a turning bow, and by the Middle Ages a pedal. By the Industrial Revolution, steam engines did most of the load, and by the 19th century, electric motors. As you can see, this big monster of a machine right here. Are you saying that we're that far behind? Poseidon, one day, went for a walk and decided to pay a visit to a family who lived on two plains. One on the outside of the center island and the one in the middle had a large hill. A man named Evenor and his wife Leucippe that lived there and spent some time getting to know their daughter named Cletio. And like the Mills and Bloom trashy romance novella, he fell in absolute love with her and took her into his arms like Braun Rhett Butler kissing hesitant Scarlett O'Hara. But after a couple of slaps on the face or three, eventually Poseidon proposed and she said, "All right, let's give it a shot." As soon as her parents passed away, Poseidon got busy creating this island. He built a small house on the hill for his lovey, and then he continued to make more elliptical structures around the main center island. Here's a quote describing this. The plains within that island was fertile and fair, including the center 50 stadia, such a mountain not too high. Being the bigger man himself, he acquired a technology, as I said earlier, that was unheard of during Solon's time. To his engineering expertise, he managed to break in the ground, meaning possibly dredge the ground using some machine like this one to excavate channels, forming canals to allow water to flow through. Here's a quote on being a god. He himself, being a god, found no difficulty in making special arrangements for the center island, bringing up 2 springs of water from beneath the earth, one of warm water and the other of cold, and making every variety of food to spring up abundantly from the soil. So, he started from the center island, formed a hilltop, then proceeded to form another smaller island around the first, then proceeded to go bigger and better circles around each other, each zone filled with water, as you can see in this diagram. So, how did he manage to create such a huge undertaking? Critias never explained any other technologies used to perform such a task. Once he built a comfy McMansion for his lovey on the center island, something like this one, but bigger and better. Sounds like this Poseidon fellow was in possession of highly advanced technology in which Critias was told has no difficulty in making special arrangement. Possibly he called in a team of builders to engineer the task. Obviously this was not a DIY project. Even to create plumbing and water systems to supply fresh water from beneath the ground, hot and cold, and a veggie garden to grow abundant food, like a greenhouse perhaps. He wasn't ready to open the island for business just yet. He hadn't finished dredging the canals to allow ships to voyage through. In the meantime, to keep his missus occupied, he gave her children. Yes, and a lot of them. 10. In fact, in sets of 5 twins. Wow, he's been busy. A genetic lottery, perhaps? Anyway, these lucky lot of twins scored an inheritance of a lifetime, the estate of Poseidon. And yes, they were well behaved indeed, weren't they? They were given each several estates that stretched across northern Africa all the way to the parts of central Italy. Here's a quote to explain this. All these and their descendants for many generations were the inhabitants and rulers of divers islands in the open sea. And also, as has been already said, they held sway in our direction over the country within the pillars as far as Egypt and Tyrrhenia. You must be wondering, were they loaded? Ha! Of course they were. More wealthier than the oligarchs of Britain, Russian, and Europe combined. But you must be thinking, how on earth did they build their wealth? Well, I'm glad you asked. They dug out of the earth whatever was to be found there, solid as well as fusel, and that which is now only a name and was then something more than a name, orichalcum, was dug out of the earth in many parts of the island, being more precious in those days than anything except gold. What does this quote tell you? It suggests that Poseidon wasn't necessarily just a god who possessed the wizardry of Oz's magical powers. No, Poseidon, or whoever he was, a mining engineer. He had, in his possession, highly advanced technology to mine for orichalcum, which is, that's right, copper. Oris plus chalcos means mountain copper. Now, copper was sourced from Cyprus during Solon's and before his time, and imported to Greece and possibly to other parts of Europe. Wait a minute. Didn't we discover copper first? Hell no, the pre-ancients did. So, am I saying that they got the technology first? Of course they did. Somehow they must have mined it from somewhere they knew had an abundance of this alloy. Right on this island. Could it be that copper was mined right on this very island, as you can see in front of you, that he created? Yes. Now, get this. Bronze didn't occur until around 3300 BC to 1200 BC. Smelting copper on a small scale occurred around 6000 BC in the Fertile Crescent, mainly to manufacture tools and weapons for one use: warfare. That's as good as we're ever going to get? Good God. Around the same time, tin was discovered around 3000 BC in Britain and the Spanish islands. So, what was his incentive? What was so important about copper that he had to mine for? Well, apart from body decoration, to show off your social status, he also used it for possibly, and I'm guessing here, this. Yep, you know what I mean. It's right in front of you. He sold a technology that made him a multi-billionaire. His family lived off the copper mining earnings that funneled to his children to inherit and never go hungry again. Money was working very hard for them. Therefore, he invested like a billionaire property developer, using money of some sort to acquire land from all over northern Africa to southern parts of Europe. Yes, they were incredibly rich. All thanks to this grand technology called copper. He amassed such wealth he was the envy to the Greeks and barbarians. Their lifestyle surpassed further than the ones in Beverly Hills and Malibu. It was like Monaco, but less elaborate. Here's a quote to prove it. There was an abundance of wood for carpenter's work and sufficient maintenance for time and wild animals. Moreover, there were a great number of elephants in the island, for as there was provision for all other sorts of animals, both for those which live in lakes and marshes and rivers, and also for those which live in mountains on plains. So there was for the animal which is the largest and most vicarious of all. And you could say they even had their own private wildlife park. They were royalty in their own right. However, they seemed pretty down to earth about their power and social status, as they didn't go around parading their lavish wealth to the world. Here's a quote. Also, whatever fragrant things there now are in the earth, whether roots or herbage or woods or essences, which distill from fruit and flower, grew and thrived in that land. Also the fruit which admits of cultivation, both the dry sort, which is given us for nourishment, and any other which we use for food, we call them all by the common name of pulse, and the fruits having a hard rind, affording drinks and meats and ointments and good store of chestnuts and the like, which furnish pleasure and amusement, and our fruits which spoil with keeping, and the pleasant kinds of dessert which we console ourselves after dinner, when we are tired of eating all these, that sacred island which then beheld the lights of the sun, brought forth fair and wondrous and in infinite abundance. Yes, money. Whatever they wanted, money can buy. Hold it right there. If they did use money, what sort of currency did they mint? Well, let me give you a clue. Yes, they had a monetary system, a very effective one. It wasn't debased by printing infinitely without something to back it, like the gold standard. It certainly wasn't ink on paper as an IOU. No, they had something more concentrated, something like this and other currencies such as this. They weren't solely dependent on the acquisition of wealth to boost their egos. Time and freedom was the essence. These types of coins were based from an out-of-this-world, quantum cybernated infrastructure based on time and effort as a backed value. Critias goes on further in great detail about their extravagant lifestyle. The way he interpreted their abode was some kind of royal palace like this one. Talk about a touch of class. These pre-ancients had taste galore. It was a first-rate style of palace with everything they wanted and needed, only money can buy. From world-class security to high-end wrought iron gates, bridges with style that stretched for miles, 24/7 CCTV like watchtowers, guest houses, sunrooms, bathrooms for their family and private guests, stables, pergolas, gazebos, patios, and an enormous, lavish and manicured landscape adorned with trees, plants, flowers of all sorts, you name it, even a wildlife safari park. Well, how about that, eh? But according to Critias, the animals, including the horses and cattle, were provided for. He even said that the outside of the palace property and the surrounds was some kind of urban city. This urban city was well provided with a pretty thorough infrastructure like aqueducts, gardens, gyms, fountains, roads, and even a racetrack. Seriously? No, I'm not referring to the Melbourne Cup, the race that stops the nation. For what use is unknown, but it could have been like a usual traffic light highway. But that's getting off topic. Back to the palace. It exceeded that of Buckingham Palace. Whether Critias was awestruck by the love of the divine sure took his mind to a faraway place. He goes on describing the interior of this mansion. His mind must have been so astonished at the fine craftsmanship that struck his imagination, such as dedicated statues of symbolic gesture to their kind, fierce-looking artwork of pinnacles embellished in gold and silver. Wait a minute. Am I missing something here? Gold and silver wasn't discovered until many thousands of years later. Sure, early humans would have stumbled upon it in some Spanish cave dating back to around 40,000 BC, but not at an industrial scale. And yet, there were gold deposits, like this one for example, discovered along the river banks of Africa and Eurasia at separate times. But humans didn't know how to smelt gold, let alone copper, until around between 3,300 to 3000 BC. Feeling stumped? You're not alone. Now, to Critias and Solon, they both thought Poseidon had really poor taste. I mean, could it be any worse? He then described Poseidon's shrine of remembrance, or sanctuary. The roof was covered in ivory, gold, silver and copper, from walls to floor and every single pillar. If the roof was covered in ivory per se, he would have had to cull hundreds of elephants just to cover a small section of a roof, right? That doesn't make sense. I believe the ivory roof wasn't made of ivory at all. It was made of another durable substance, and I'll talk about that in a future video. Back to the mansion. Even the statues were covered in gold, but he wasn't told what type of statues the billionaire had. The interior of the mansion was brimming with colour, light, and statues galore. Statues of faithful devotion to private persons only known to Poseidon. Maybe it resembled that of picture-framed family photos, but in stone. Outside the building, more gold statues, yes, mostly dedicated to the descendants of his children, other kings and private persons that coming both from the city itself and from the foreign cities over which they held sway. But wait, there's more. And yes, an altar of some kind, as you can see here, that displayed tremendous craftsmanship. There was the god himself standing in a chariot, the charioteer of the six-winged horses of such a size that he touched the roof of the building with his head. Around him there were 100 nereids riding on dolphins. Even the missus had her own private sanctuary, complete with gold, statues, gardens and podium, a place for the couple to relax and unwind. Think of it as an elite health spa and a yearly gathering for a spectacular light show event, giving thanks with offerings of 10 fruits. Critias illustrated the construction technique that was not yet discovered on an industrial scale until a few thousand years later. Stone. Stone was a new technology that was proudly displayed on their property. Various stones were quarried on site at the island from the centre, underneath the zones and outer and inner sides. One kind was white, another black, and a third red, and as they quarried, they at the same time hollowed out double docks, having roofs formed out of the native rock. I'm beginning to suspect that this construction technology was handed down to us humans to assist us in building high quality shelter. Yet Stone Age began around 2.6 million years ago on a small scale, but it wasn't until around 6,000 years ago we began to promote it on a large scale. Could it be possible these pre-ancients gave us technology that would help us to live a better quality of life? Back to the McMansion. This foxy building is a true sight for sore eyes. The stones were probably a mix of granite, sandstone, limestone, marble, and basalt. The architecture was uncomplicated yet spacious and modest. The entire circuit of the wall, which went round the outermost zone, they covered with a coating of brass, and the circuit of the next wall they coated with tin, and the third, which encompassed the citadel, flashed with the red light of orichalcum. What the? Flashing red light in the appearance of copper? Although the Egyptian priests told Solon that they thought was a royal palace that overlooked the land around them, wouldn't you think that this royal palace was far more than just a residential castle? If there were flashing red lights like this one, could it be a beacon for ships to alert them of when they are getting too close to shore? Okay, I think I'm getting a mental picture here of something really ingenious. I'll give you a clue. Let's think back for a minute. Poseidon was a mining engineer who made his wealth through distributing copper. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? I'll give you a hint. I think he introduced a brand new technology that lit up the island at night. Us humans would have been in absolute reverence at the spectacular glowing orb, make-believing it was magic, as you can see right here. To sum up, they had harbours, bridges, gates, high security, water traffic, canals, a great water filtration system, greenhouses, housing, administration buildings, and it was a bustling place full of people like New York City. It never sleeps. The docks were full of triremes and naval stores, and all things were quite ready for use. Enough of the plan of the royal palace. So, Atlantis was a very vibrant and very well-off city, an incredibly prosperous one that excelled Las Vegas by a mile. There were endless supply of goods and services that money can buy. They even celebrated festivals, some kind of Thanksgiving festival twice a year. The surrounding mountains were celebrated for their number and size and beauty, far beyond any which still exist, having in them also many wealthy villages of country folk, and rivers and lakes and meadows, supplying food enough for every animal, wild or tame, and much wood of various sorts, abundant for each and every kind of work. Oh, I almost forgot. You must be thinking, did they have a military regime? Yes, for a good reason, to ward off uninvited and unwanted foreign invaders, casing out the joint. It was estimated to be around 60,000. But not in Atlantis alone. The military powerhouse covered most of northern Africa and southern parts of Europe for the safety of the people and his children. They recruited men and women for military service as a backup plan for future warfare. They were well prepared, highly organized, and very efficient. Like the military-industrial complex, their military outposts accommodated them according to their districts. Their leader from each of their subdivided cities provided so-called war chariots, a total of around 10,000. The army consisted of stone shooters, javelin throwers, slingers, archers, foot soldiers, well armoured, along with sailors that complement of 12,000 ships allocated to the subdivided lands all along the continent. Although not all 9 landholders all got along. And there was law and order within Atlantis and all over the northern continent. These laws were inscribed on a copper plate on a pillar like a declaration of peace that was celebrated every 5th, and 6th year with his children at their father's home to honour these laws. They meet to discuss and negotiate interests, laws and issues before making a final decision. And yes, there was also law enforcement. For example, if a citizen violated one of these laws, a punishment was decided that fit the crime. You could say they had some kind of court system where they deliberated over a criminal case. Don't get me wrong, they were not an oligarchy mafia. No way. Sure, the entire family swore an oath never to go to war against each other, and out of necessity to save each other if their cities were terrorized by outside forces. And get this, these pre-ancients were the exemplar of servitude to the people, not the other way around. But for every prosperous empire, it had to come with a warning label. But to those who had no eye to see the true happiness, they appeared glorious and blessed at every time when they were full of avarice and unrighteous power. Critias ends with this tragic reminder that absolute power corrupts absolute. Do not bestow power onto a malicious and primitive human. Yes, in short, Atlantis was a paradox of contemporary technology. It flaunted its art, colour, language and surrounds without hindrance. These pre-ancients knew what they were doing and done it to a fine art. The most disturbing part of the story is the untimely tragic end. Atlantis stood its ground for a very long time, but like Sun Tzu's philosophy, after a couple of successive generations, their principles and their teachings suddenly disappeared. Mysteriously, Plato's Critias abruptly ends with, and when he called them together, he spoke as follows. So, what happened? What went wrong? Why was an emergency crisis meeting called by a man named Zeus? Was he the overseer of the whole enterprised experiment? Was his excited curiosity shattered? We don't know, but Critias puts it in mildly cryptic form. Zeus, the god of gods, who rules according to law and is able to see into such things, perceiving that an honourable race was in a woeful plight, and wanting to inflict punishment on them that they might be chastened and improve, collected all the gods into their most holy habitation, which, being placed in the centre of the world. Would this suggest that whoever this pre-ancient was received a radio-coded message requesting help? Sounds like Atlantis and its inhabitants were in dire straits. A war had erupted unannounced and they were left with one simple choice: get busy fighting a losing war or just cut your losses and leave. The decision was unanimous. They left. Something went wrong big time. I'll be doing more future videos to uncover the actual cause of the mysterious matter. The answer will astound you. That's all for now.